Hamilton. It's popular, it has an intense fan base, and until recently to see the production live was really expensive. But it's not anymore. It's on Disney+, and with the exception of bleeping the F word to keep the PG-13 rating, it's basically what you would see if you went to see the production when the original cast was performing. I was really excited to see the production because I'd never seen a live performance of it, and then I started scrolling on Twitter to see what was trending, and I came across this tweet which says, "Just remembered that Toni Morrison hated Hamilton so much that she funded a play about how terrible and useless it was." And I was kind of shocked. I know there'd been criticism of Hamilton before, but I never really looked into what it was for or why, and then I did a bit of research. See, criticism of Hamilton isn't new. In 2015, when the musical was released, outside of the intense praise it got, there was also a fair amount of criticism about how the historical figures are idealized, and overall the story is whitewashed. Oh wait, how can a musical be whitewashed if almost the entire cast are people of color? The argument isn't that the cast is whitewashed, it's that the narrative completely omits any black figures who were around at the time. In an essay review, Dr. Lyra Montiero writes, "Not a single enslaved or free person of color exists as a character in this play. For the space of only a couple of bars, a chorus member assumes the role of Sally Hemings, but is recognizable as such only by those who catch Jefferson's reference to the enslaved woman with whom he had an ongoing sexual relationship. Unless one listens carefully to the lyrics, which do mention slavery a handful of times, one could easily assume that slavery did not exist in this world, and certainly was not an important part of the lives and livelihoods of the men who created the nation." When the musical came out on Broadway, though, one of the most prominent and harsh critiques came from writer Ishmael Reed. He published an article in the online journal Counterpunch titled, "Hamilton the Musical, Black Actors Dress Up as Slave Traders and It's Not Even Halloween." It's important to note that when Reed's critique came out, he hadn't actually seen the musical in person. He read the script and based his critiques on that. The main premise of his argument is that both by historians and in Hamilton the Musical, the historical figures are painted as idealistic, and their involvement of slavery isn't really explored. The musical paints Alexander Hamilton as an abolitionist, but that's not the whole truth. In reality, he married into the Schuyler family, a prominent slaveholding and slave-trading family. George Washington also was a slaveholder and created methods to return runaways, but this isn't talked about in the musical either. And the omission of these black narratives is part of why Toni Morrison disliked the musical so much. So much so that she was the largest patron in Ishmael Reed's play, The Haunting of Lin-Manuel Miranda. The play essentially follows the style of Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Fictional Lin-Manuel Miranda is visited by numerous characters left out of his musical. Characters like black slaves, Native Americans, and even Harriet Tubman. At the end of the play, fictional Miranda is convinced that he must undo the damage caused by his musical. Fictional Miranda states, quote, "Because of me, thousands of school children are trapped intellectually in the same lies that I was." Eventually, Reed did see the musical in 2019. In a second article, he wrote if he had to headline the play, he'd say, "Hamilton is a bad jingoistic history salvaged by the brilliant performance of a multicultural cast." Which is pretty harsh, but it brings up another interesting aspect of the musical. The casting. When you look at the cast of the Hamilton show, the stage is made up mostly of minorities. Sometimes it's referred to as colorblind casting, but when you look at this, you can see it's definitely intentional. Miranda doesn't talk about casting often, but in an IndieWire interview, the casting director for Hamilton says Miranda wanted to make sure the representation was there. In that same article, Leslie Odom Jr., who plays Aaron Burr, says there's irony, dissidence, and boldness attached to the way Lynn and Tommy chose to populate the stage. That is done consciously. There's nothing blind about it. As the Black Lives Matter movement has shown, in so many mediums there's a lack of diversity. But a real value of the Hamilton musical is giving minorities the opportunity to see themselves represented on stage, which is especially important for young people.
Ma, it's me.
It's you?
Yeah, what are you talking about?
This is you?
Yeah.
In this case, though, when a diverse cast is playing slave owners, it gets a bit more complex. Christopher Jackson, who plays George Washington, talks about the kind of internal conflict he had playing a slave owner in the documentary Hamilton's America.
From the moment I knew I was going to be playing Washington, it was the first thing that came into my mind, the slave question. The reality of the fact that he owned people. I'll never make peace with it. I try to, till I stood in the slave quarters, and there's no way to reconcile that. But there's nothing that I can do to change those things, and there's nothing in my portrayal that would suggest that we forgive any of that.
Following the release of the musical on Disney+, all of this criticism resurfaced, and Lin-Manuel Miranda has actually responded. Writer Tracy Clayton tweeted, "Hamilton the play and the movie were given to us in two different worlds, and our willingness to interrogate things in this way feels like a clear sign of change. I totally get the frustration about it being a play about slaveholders that is not about slavery. I felt that in a lot of things I watch, but I flex the same muscle when I listen to hip-hop as a black woman. Hamilton is a flawed play about flawed people, written by an imperfect person that gave my flawed and imperfect little life a big boost when I needed it most." Miranda responded, "All the criticisms are valid. The sheer tonnage of complexities and failings of these people I couldn't get, or wrestled with but cut. I took 6 years and fit in as much as I could in a 2.5-hour musical. Did my best, it's all fair game." I feel like this sums up how a lot of Hamilton fans feel when watching the performance. Yes, things could have been done to portray the figures more accurately. Joanne Freeman, the historian and Hamilton expert Miranda worked with, says if all the details were included, it would really change the narrative of the musical.
There are many things that are not in the show that could be in the show. I mean, it could be a different show and confront slavery in a different way.
That's not to say it's necessarily a bad thing, though. Professor and writer Roxane Gay tweeted, "I think it's a brilliant show, as I said. It's not some vulnerable upstart. The show can handle critical engagement, and the performances and book and music will still be absolutely incredible. And that critical engagement is an important factor too. It's what allows us to reflect and improve our depictions of history and art going forward." At the end of all this, I still enjoy the Hamilton musical, but it's important to look at it for what it is. It's a work of historical fiction, and there are definitely parts that could be improved upon. There are narratives that are omitted from the show, but I'm really excited for the day when we can enjoy something similar to Hamilton that tells the story accurately, and that tells the story of the voices that are often left out of history. That's of course my opinion, but I'd love to hear what you think, so leave me a comment below. And also in the description, I'll leave all of the resources I used for this video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe for more content coming your way, and follow me on social media, on Twitter, on Instagram, on TikTok before it gets banned. And that's all I've got for you. See you in the next one.